To give you a description of the situation I am in, I must give you a description. I am 18 years old and I am gay. I've never had a real boyfriend and only recently came out. As for social anxiety, I have very few close friends, and I use online forums or chat sites to talk to people. It was August-September 2015 and I was a senior. I broke up with this guy I was talking to and I was ready to talk to anyone. You might say I'm a bit naive, and that's mostly from shyness. Anyway, I came across this app called Meet Me and decided to give it another try. I used to have an app, but deleted it due to lack of interest because most of the guys on there are pervs, or for lack of a better word, weird. But I wanted to reload it because being a normal 17-year-old at the time, I thought it was a good choice. The first week of being on the app went smoothly and I made a few friends there. Nothing romantic. That is, until he sent me a message. It was Saturday night and I noticed that I had a new admirer there. I wasn't really intimidated by it because I've talked to a lot of guys and girls from the site, but this guy was different. Something about his picture screamed. He was definitely not in my age group and must have been around 30, 40. He was tall with curly hair and a smile that would make you think he was a sex offender or a street driver. He was also from Great Britain. Although my eyes judged him, I'm generally a nice person, so I decided to let him know out of general kindness. This is the biggest mistake. The conversation started on my end with a simple hello and innocent friendship. How are you today? 5 minutes later, I got a reply. You are beautiful. I was immediately afraid one. I was 17 years old and he was definitely older than me. 2. He couldn't miss it because my age was on my profile and he decided to message me. Hi, no, I'm not good about myself. Simple but strange. You're beautiful. I should have blocked her at one point or another, but like a dumbass, I let my beauty get the better of me. I replied as nicely as I could. Sorry, but I'm not interested, but thanks. 10 minutes later, I got a message saying, hey, you're hot. I want to get to know you more. At this point, I thought this guy had jumped the gun and was hoping that eventually he would stop messaging me and move on to some other unhappy guy. I was wrong. Texts went back and forth throughout the night. Messages. Do you like BDSM? I would love to tie this guy up. Baby, why don't you answer me? I'm here for you. Finally, the hardest part has reached its climax. He also started asking me on Skype so he can sleep on me and masturbate on me. At this point, I was angry and scared of the messages he was sending, so I did the right thing and blocked him. I didn't sleep that night and the thought of watching me was chilling to the bone. A few weeks later, I was at a friend's house and I was bored. I have insomnia, and when I can't sleep at night, I watch my favorite YouTubers. But tonight I decided to meet up to check the fan because I haven't checked it in a long time and I'm bored. I had a friend request from the same guy. This time he made a new account with a different profile picture. He was shirtless and had an evil smile on his face. He started talking to me, baby. Where did you go? Why did you stop me? Things of that nature. I should have blocked him, but at this point I was getting bold and sick of his messages. I pretended to be my boyfriend and texted him, oh, it's her boyfriend. If you message him again, we will have problems. It upset him, but surprisingly, he listened to me and blocked me, but not before he sent me one last message. 4 words flashed through my mind. His last words to me were, I'm watching you. Of course, like most people in my situation, I was scared and angry. But at the same time, I thanked God for living in a completely different country on a completely different continent. But, like last time, I didn't sleep that night. Then I had night terrors from this guy who had been stalking me for weeks. Eventually, I forgot about it and it became a repressed memory. That is, until today. Fast forward to a month ago, while going to a restaurant with a Facebook friend, I came across this message that horrified me. The article read, Investigating Accused Miller Serial Killer. This article was posted in January 2016, and being in America, I was not aware of UK news. I wasn't that scared until I saw the guy's picture. The same guy who sent me creepy messages turned out to be a serial killer who looked like gay men. According to the article, the sick priest used the gay app Grindr to take gay men to his home, poison and strangle them, then dump their bodies around East London. The same guy, the same exact guy, sent me horrible and violent messages and committed such horrible and heinous crimes. I didn't tell many people about it because I didn't want people to worry about me. I didn't even tell my dad. I'm telling everything because he's very protective of me. I know you are asking, why are you so worried? He lives all over the world. And even if this is true, the simple thought of meeting someone like that, not just a serial killer, but I was dumb and lived in East London, would be one of his victims. I'm very comfortable talking about it now because he's under guard, still around the world, and has no way to contact me or even remember me. Honestly, I want to keep it that way. 3. That was about 10 years ago. I was 12 or 13 at the time. I grew up in a small town in southern Ontario, Canada, where there was really nothing to do during summer vacation. To beat the summer heat, my dad and I would take 2 weeks off every summer and rent a cabin up north. Our favorite place is a small tourist island called Minitula Island, which is a 6-hour drive north of our hometown, followed by a 2-hour ferry ride across the lake to the island. While on the ferry, an older gentleman in a semi-formal suit and trousers handed out pamphlets in the tourist section of the boat. My father and I went to him and got one of his flyers. This map of the island was created in MS Paint, or equivalent free drawing software. There were various tourist spots and picnic areas on the map. We thanked the man and left for the planned full island tour. When he returned to the guest room half an hour later, the man was gone. When we finally got to the island, we thought we were out of cards. It took an extra hour and a half to reach our cabin, which was 15 meters from the edge of a beautiful cliff. We spent most of 2 weeks traveling from one end of the island to the other, hitting every tourist center and little shop we went to. On the last 3 days of our trip, we ran out of places to see, and then Dad remembered the map. In the far right corner of the map, which was also the lowest, most accessible end of the island, was a long dotted line indicating a wide dirt road. At the end of the road was a picnic area. Why do we think that? It's by the lake, and it can be pretty. We packed our bags and piled into an old 1988 Ford Mustang ragtop. This car was pushed to the absolute limits of this trip, and it became difficult to start. The oil ran thin several times during the trip due to the summer heat and use. But the car still ran, and Dad, being a mechanic, thought nothing of it. After the car rested for several hours, the oil pressure continued to remain at normal levels. We pulled out an old school paper map and planned the route. The drive was beautiful, open fields and emerald forests. You could call it before we started to reach civilization. The houses we saw in every town we passed were very boring. In one of our hometowns, we witnessed all the Americans covered in red and black war paint staring at us as we passed. But again, we thought nothing of it. Maybe it's just a ceremony or a celebration that we didn't know about. Hell. Finally, we hit the last road that will take us down the dirt road, the last road we haven't discovered yet. At this point, we had been driving for about 2 hours, and the oil pressure in the hot car was slowly dropping, but we were very close to our destination. As we walked along this road, we saw houses that were cracked and mostly boarded up. The distance between them widened until finally there were no houses. The road turned from asphalt to cracked gray stone, gravel, and then dirt. The road became so narrow that only one car could fit on it at a time, and we hoped that no one on 4 wheels would turn around like a beach from hell. I also want to mention that the telephone poles stopped on the gravel road. Not all returnees were provided by the city. The further we went, the more uncomfortable we became. Behind the broken and rotting trees, we saw old abandoned wooden furniture. The sun faded over the thick foliage. We continued driving, joking about hills, blind spots, wrong turns, and other dangerous situations. Finally, we got to the clearing. As we walked along the road we saw in Salem, we saw what was described as a huge pillar of fire, similar to what burned the witches. The object was massive, at least 15 feet tall and half a 10-foot platform. It was built of twine, logs, twigs, and straw. In the center of the platform was a large log that stood up from the middle and stood another 8 feet high. Seriously, burn at the stake, that's what it was. A little further down the highway was an old 2-story house. It reminded me of a plantation house, not because of its size, but because of its design. Almost all the windows were broken, and an old door hung from one of the hinges in the hall. About 10 meters below the house was a rock that fell into the lake. Dad and I thought we had missed a turn, but there was no way we were going. My stomach dropped as I looked past the old dove house. There was a picnic table by the white wagon across the ditch. This is a wooden picnic table by the house. Dad and I exchanged nervous glances, and suddenly I saw a cloud of dust out of the corner of my eye. A red van pulled up to our parked car. He came from behind the house and hit the floor with his foot. My father was horrified. He threw the Mustang into reverse and spun around so fast I almost threw up. He moved to the car and collapsed, but something made his eyes widen. The car was crying for him. Oil pressure was at risk. He swore at the gun. The car squealed a bit, ripping through the mud and gravel as we got out of it. Our lives depended on it. Who knows? Maybe they did. We drove the dirt road, took dangerous turns, and gasped for air as we hit huge holes in the ground. During that time, the car screamed at him and told him to stop, but he couldn't. He never slowed down. He never looked back. When we finally reached the paved part of the road, my father looked back. No one followed us. He slowed down a bit, but I knew he was going over the speed limit. After clearing the lots advertising their tiny homes, we pulled into the first garage we saw. The car stopped immediately. For the last 2 days, we have been in our cabin trying to tell what happened, and we couldn't do anything, because repairing the car used up the rest of our money. The last time we talked about the incident was the day we left the island, but at the ferry house we looked for the man who kept the maps. He wasn't there. We asked a few people who were going shopping on the mainland, and no one had heard of the picnic area we were visiting. After showing us the map we were given, no one recognized the area we had passed through the small towns before us, but warned us that the inhabitants of these towns are not always kind to strangers. I think the picnic area is a trap to drive curious people who are killed and barbecued in their shrine, or maybe stolen. Who knows? So I hope you don't mind going to the island. It is a beautiful and peaceful place. The locals are friendly, kind, and reliable. If you see an elderly gentleman in a semi-formal suit and trousers, take his card and give him a sweet smile. Some places are truly wonderful, but I never, and never will, go to the picnic area at the bottom of the island. Number 2. I remember the day I died very well. I was a freshman at Oklahoma State, and the summer was only a few months away. My friends John and Jane and I loved to travel and decided to go on a road trip last summer. We were very familiar with the destination, having traveled there 6 or 7 times. It was only a few hours away from our hometown, and we were excited as always. Being typical guys, John and I each packed a bag and Jane had a few. We met at John's place at 6 a.m. that morning and got into his Jeep. I remember being so excited that my life would soon change forever. We reached the park at 9 a.m. and started our trek to the first hill. Since it was August, the temperature was in the mid-90s, and it seemed like a long day until we reached the top of the first mountain. There were a few more hikers and campers before we reached the base of the park. So we were so far into the forest that civilization disappeared. Around 1 o'clock we stopped for a water break. All 3 of us were very happy when we heard about this incident. Guncock. It's a very special sound that John and I felt immediately. We stood up and looked in all directions for the culprit, but saw nothing. I remember the way John and I looked at each other. No weapons are allowed in this area of the park. We yelled, "Oh, hello! Who's there?" several times, but never got a reply. After discussing the situation, we decided to continue playing the fallen tree hand. I left the rest of the trip, as did John and Jane. What happened was sketchy, but we were too far gone to turn back now. Darkness fell around 9 p.m. and we dropped right into our camp. Each of us had a strong fire and 3 small tents. We ate a packed lunch and talked by the fire. The 3 of us talked about funny shit and serious shit as usual. I remember hearing another strange noise when Jane was talking about her upcoming classes. Branches and leaves with bare feet, about 20 feet into the dark. Again, this got us all on our feet. We knew it was no coincidence that we heard 2 strange humanoid voices in our neighborhood inside the park. Of course we followed. When we stopped, the tracks stopped. Remember, we didn't have the tools to defend ourselves if we needed to, and there was no cell phone service at all. Jane was the first to react. He yelled, "Whoever follows us, I'm letting you know I've got a gun." Of course, Jane was lying, but John and I were amazed at her quick thinking. As the adrenaline wore off, a raucous laugh came from the trees. It was a sarcastic laugh, and it was low. We heard it a lot, but it was a joke. It was indeed snickering, and his tracks faded out of hearing range. We are shocked and scared beyond belief, but you want to say it. We knew our problems. I'm overcome with a sense of foreboding, and I trust John and Jane as well. It was black and we would go back. We threw offers at each other and discussed our options. Meanwhile, Jane is crying and shaking. It was a hard gallery, so it was hard to see at the time. Finally, we all settled into the tent with our pocket knives. Earlier, when I say these tents are small, I mean small. Maybe 5 feet wide and 7 feet long, so we're in a hurry to say the least. It was hot and sticky and very uncomfortable, but we felt safe. Looking back, it's embarrassing to show how scared we were, especially as a 19-year-old. But trust me, when you're in the dark woods, looking for an unknown gun-toting man, anyone is scared. After a few hours of sleep, things got better. We slowly began to jest into the woods, mimicking Jane's earlier holler and gunshot threat. We asked loudly how long he had been sick and asked him if he was our personal bodyguard. We were very mentally disturbed. It must be around 1 a.m. when we finally start to fall asleep. I was the last to wake up, but quickly heard the rustling of leaves. I knew John and Jane were sleeping with heavy breathing. I didn't want to wake them up and start the whole process over, so I just sat there and listened. The footsteps were slow and gentle, but they were getting closer. Before I knew it, they were almost outside the tent. I kicked John 3 times before he woke up. He was startled and shouted, "Bad what?" This started a series of unfortunate events. All of them shot in response to Jane in one motion, and the tracks outside began to turn towards our tent. As I turned my body away from my assailants, a predatory sound in the tent slipped from my side. In the chaos, I yelled, "John, get your gun! Shoot this guy!" After saying that, the trail ran into the forest and we ran out of the tent and almost ran into each other. To summarize, the man took the hunting knife to our tent and dropped it before running. We ran for the rest of the night and in the morning until we found a cell phone signal to call the police. That day we had to bring the sheriff's office back to the scene to get our stuff and put it away. That's when they found the knife. We spent the whole day at the police station and gave our statements. We were so close to death and I think about it every day. I don't know what that man wanted, why he didn't shoot us, but I'm glad I escaped the night with my life. Thank God I lied to God about the gun. I am now a senior at another school in Oklahoma, but I keep in touch with John and Jane. But I couldn't bring myself to travel again. This story was about local news, and I hope you'll check it out. I would encourage anyone who wants to ride to always have the right gear. I'm grateful for my life every day, and writing about this experience has been therapeutic. Safe travels, my friends. 1. I had a lot of weird experiences growing up in my home, and I thought I'd share a few. The house I grew up in was built in the 50s and was a model for the neighborhood. My mother originally grew up in the house and eventually bought it from her grandmother, who kept the house and family for nearly 50 years. I spent a lot of time at home and was never alone, but it never bothered me. I mean, I didn't have to go downstairs. It will definitely change the feeling of the house. It's always cool and predictable. When you have to go downstairs, it creates a sense of dread and I get chills just thinking about it. It had a family room with a TV and fireplace, a finished bathroom, a computer room, a bedroom, a laundry room, and a large storage room. The storage room was the worst part of the basement, my least favorite place. The door to it, like the other rooms in the basement, was a sliding wooden door, and it was directly next to the TV, which always gave me an eerie feeling when I was a child watching a small TV. Anyway, getting off was always a bit of a process. I would slowly walk up the stairs, look around the wall into the family room to make sure the edge was clear, then bolt for the light fixture. Upstairs? Now it was even worse. I have to put out the lights so my dad doesn't get in trouble. And God forbid, it's like burning a yard in a bucket of water, waiting upstairs to put them out and flood the stairs. I have never run without someone chasing me and winning a race. Growing up, I would hear low voices, even whispers. When I was home alone, I would hear people running upstairs, which would make me think someone had come home, only to find that I was alone. They would call me downstairs as my mother had heard. And when I came down, there was no one there. It was rare for the lights to go out while watching downstairs because Dad was too crazy to waste energy and Mom would just use what was in the laundry room. Her door was under the stairs, so I wasn't sure if it was legal to call my mom before I went downstairs, opened the door, and turned off the laundry room lights. And I was the only one home. Soon I realized that I was standing in the basement, alone, in the dark. It happened often, and when it did, it was never scary. All this went on for a while, and I would have these dreams, and I would do what I always do in the basement, play video games, watch TV, etc. But that would be the lady in the white dress. Types are watching me. I looked to my right, and he was far away, standing and looking down with his hands down. I would turn my head to the left, and that was it. Sometimes I would look around and see that he was still there, but sitting next to me, his body straight, but his head down and looking straight at me. At that moment, I immediately woke up and was covered in sweat. Downstairs, an unused spare room also contains old military clothing and a wardrobe, with other jackets and clothing stored in plastic bags. Sometimes, when I was little, my friends and I would play hide-and-seek there, and it would be my favorite hide-and-seek place because you could hide between the clothes, even if someone was pointing at you. The clothes, unlike anything else in the house, made a very special sound when touched or moved. As I got older, when the strange basement activity started to increase, I would often hear this sound before going upstairs. The light for the family room is under the bedroom door, and when I went upstairs I could hear something coming out of the closet. Seeing me looking through the light door into the dark room through the open door, it made me turn the stairs for dear life, even faster than usual. As I said, basement activity increases with age. My girlfriend Lynn and I would always stay downstairs to avoid my parents. For better or worse, it was our core. One day we finished watching a movie and he went to the bathroom. While he was there, I had to check what was in my room on my computer. Without thinking, I ran upstairs to do a quick check on her, then came back moments later. She came out of the bathroom and gave me what she called her skeptical eyes. I asked him what happened, and he said it was funny. I was confused and asked what he was talking about. He explained that I ran down the stairs very quickly, then opened the storage room door and carried the heavy object to the bathroom door. I didn't know what to say. I tried to tell him that I ran upstairs to check the computer and that I wasn't downstairs, but he didn't believe me. Fortunately, I had written a few messages on AIM and was able to show him the time frame of the chat log, which confirmed my point but at the same time set him free. He also realized that he hadn't heard the door being pulled, which brought him back, scaring him even more. This happened to him several more times over the course of several weeks. I could go on, but I'll end with this last story. Although I have dozens of stories I could write, this is the highlight of my story. A few years later, Lynn and I got married, and Mom and Dad were asked to dog sit while on vacation. My parents had 2 purebred Shih Tzus, who were told to stay in the kitchen. Lynn and I decided to stay for just a few days because my parents' house was a bit more comfortable for us. One night, like the beginning of a horror movie, he began to attack violently from outside. The dark house would be completely illuminated by full lightning, and a loud thunder would shake seconds later. The 2 dogs loved thunder, and they never barked. If anything, it probably helped them sleep because I couldn't use one of them in the bathroom. In the middle of the night, as my wife and I were going to bed with the TV on, I thought I heard footsteps on the stairs, but I put it down to the storm. Soon I heard the sliding door at the top of the stairs, which was locked and could only be closed from the inside, slide open, and the dogs suddenly started going crazy. I never heard them scream at me. I dropped my covers and tell Lynn I'll check them. That's when we heard it. Above the sound of the rain and their screams, We both suddenly hear a woman talking to my mother. I couldn't make out exactly what was said, but I could tell it was in a very familiar, comforting tone, something Mom would do when she was afraid of something. I thought for a moment that my parents had come home really early, but soon I heard an announcement, a car pulling up, or the back doors opening. And then, of course, a one-sided fight. Lock on the sliding door. Not only that, the dogs would be delighted to see them. It was a completely different shell. It was terror. They squealed and screamed, my mother's familiar voice still speaking. I asked Lynn to check in case she came in, but deep down, we both knew what we were doing. I got out of bed, my voice drowned out by the chaos inside and outside the house. The door to the room led to an L-shaped hallway, and exiting the room would put you at the bottom right of that shape. In other words, L is the lowercase letter shape. Against Lynn's request, I walked out the door and into the hallway. The walls leading from the hallway to the room were lined with full-length mirrors, and it nearly gave me a heart attack when a sudden flash of lightning flashed across the hallway, revealing me standing next to it. Needless to say, we were both shocked to be there. I regrouped, shot Lynn, you didn't see that scene, and got back to work. I looked around the corner and saw two dogs with their backs against the gate, both behind the wall to the right and towards something unseen. I'm at a loss for what to do. Part of me wanted to lock myself in the room with Lynn, and the other half wanted to say it and rush to the kitchen and do what I found. I spent my life rushing upstairs from unseen terrors at home, and frankly, I wasn't a kid anymore, and I was sick of this shit. I looked at Lynn again, then decided to enter. I turned at full speed towards the kitchen. I get to the gate and both dogs immediately stop barking. The noise stops, and they both look at me. I whip my top half over the door and look into the kitchen and see nothing. I look over at them, both of them suddenly quiet but sitting in their bean pools. Accidents of this nature never happened, so that confirmed to me that something was wrong. I walk through the gate to the sliding door at the opposite end of the kitchen, which is now open and unlocked. The back door is locked from the inside and closed as I left it. But despite it being 80 degrees outside in the summer, the area in front of the back door is completely frozen. I looked downstairs, and it was pitch black and not lit like the rest of the house. At this point, I had enough adrenaline to dive into the darkness and face my childhood tormentor head on. And surprisingly, I wanted to do it, but rationality kicked in, and I closed the sliding door and tended to the dogs, spending the next hour giving them baths and mopping the floors. Lynn gave her a gift. You're such a crazy person to make those eyes. But I felt so good about it. I'm over that bitch and her tricks. A few weeks later, after my parents' vacation was over, I arrived at their house to find my mother sitting at the kitchen table that spanned from the front door to the basement stairs. I decided to sit down and tell him what happened while I watched the dogs. I remembered the stairs and the strange woman's voice, completely pale and frozen. She explained that when she was a child, she would hear a voice that sounded very close to her sister, prompting her to go down to the basement, even though it was always dark and empty. It was interesting, but it must be said that his sister is still alive today. She is also afraid to go into the basement because of the baby, and shares the feeling of falling down the stairs to this day. He also said that recently, when he was sitting alone at the table, he sometimes heard someone climbing the stairs at an inhuman speed and stopped at the swinging door, but it's never opened. Dogs can hear it too, and they don't like it. To this day, I don't know what happened at home or why. I know she is a woman, or she can pretend to be. Looks a little on the shy side, but I'm fine with that. Now I'm taking my sweet time climbing the stairs, but I still feel like I have to run for my life.